This is Surviving as a Civilian. I am your host, Scott. With the help of my friend Andrew, we created this podcast to share success stories of combat veterans and how they overcame the challenges of returning back to civilian life. These are actual stories told by actual veterans. Content warning, this podcast talks about war, and some of the stories in this podcast contain graphic events of violence and may contain explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Additionally, these veterans are telling their story of how they recall the events. Some of the details may have changed over time.
It's fine.
Welcome to Surviving as a Civilian. I am here with my friend Brian. Brian, how are you?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. So let's talk about how you decided to join the Army.
I never really have an awesome answer for this. There was no one reason that made me want to join. It was kind of like a series of events, and I kind of just thought it was a good idea at the time, and talked to a recruiter, and he's like, "Yeah, you sure you want to do this?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
So let's back up a little bit. How old were you? Were you when you joined the Army?
I was 20.
Okay, what were you doing after high school, but before the Army?
So I had a couple different jobs between high school and when I joined the Army. I dropped out of high school when I was 17. Got my GED. I thought it was a good idea because my parents had split up at the time, so there's a small lack of structure in my life, and I already had a job part-time, like on weekends and vacations from school. So I talked to my boss. I was like, "Hey, I want to drop out of school and work full-time." He was okay with it, so I worked full-time as a plumber's apprentice for a couple of years.
What kind of crazy stuff did you see as a plumber's apprentice? Honestly, was it busted pipes or was it? So where was this at?
Oh man, it was in upstate New York, like an hour north of New York City, in a little town called Pauling. And it was actually the guy that owned the company was actually the mayor of our town.
Nice. How big was the town?
That was pretty cool. Yeah. Like square footage or
no, just population wise. Yeah, Brian. I want to know the square footage of the town you grew up in.
Well, you said how big. That's usually size. I really don't know. I couldn't guess the population. I could look it up.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We'll look that up later.
Okay.
So what was what were some of the jobs you got called out on as a plumber's apprentice?
Pretty much everything. I started off the first job that I was a part of. There was a subdivision going in called Baxter Green, and it was basically like a bunch of houses. You know, the cookie cutter houses, they all look the same, and they're like 5 feet away from each other.
Yes.
It was a housing development like that, and we were basically doing what's called roughing in the plumbing, which is where you put all the supply lines, the copper supply lines, and then the plastic waste lines in the walls. You install the boilers. We use boilers on the East Coast, not furnaces. So you install the boilers and the water supplies and the waste lines, and that was the first job I was a part of. So I did everything between that and installing fixtures after it was all the walls were up and everything. We would install the fixtures like the toilets, the faucets. But occasionally we would go on jobs where somebody's septic tank had collapsed, and we would have to get in there, and it was like a metal septic tank, and we had to clear out all the metal debris and everything and stand in, a couple feet of, shit.
Dang. So you were 17, 18 doing this?
Yeah.
What were your thoughts at this point? Were you like, this is where I want to be the rest of my life, or?
Well, like I said, I was 17, so, I was getting $14 an hour to do that. And at the time, I thought it was good money.
That's phenomenal back then. Because this is probably, what, 10, 15 years ago?
About 15 years ago.
Because people don't make that now, just so you know.
No. Well, I mean, in plumbing, they would.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's crazy. How did you end up with that job?
So my dad, ever since I was like a little kid, my dad has owned a plumbing supply house. There's like wholesale distribution of plumbing and heating equipment and products and supplies. So my family has a plumbing background, whether it's, doing the service calls or in sales. So I already had kind of the background in it, and I was like, I want to work in the field as a plumber. So, I've already got the background. I already know all the products and everything from hanging out at my dad's supply house. So I was like, I'm gonna put my knowledge to work and kind of go out into the field and see what I could do. So I ended up doing that for actually I started when I was 15 or 16, just part time, while I was in school. Then when I was 17, I started full time for 3 years.
But at some point, you were like, "This is not where I want to be at in life."
Yeah, it was actually, I thought that the whole time, actually. But like I said, I thought it was good money, and it was for me at the time. But, I felt like I was working really hard all the time, every day, and I felt like I wasn't getting enough in return.
So you thought the military was the next best choice?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, I thought it would be easier to join the Army. I was just like, yeah, man, I gotta, there's so much I had to do on my own as a plumber, where like the Army, like they give you like a place to live and everything. And because like I had the option to go either like guard or reserves or active. And once my recruiter explained to me the differences, I was like, if I go active, man, I don't have to pay rent or anything like that. I live in the barracks. They give me a meal card. Like that sounds pretty easy.
So why did you pick the Army over the other services though?
Oh, actually, I picked the Marines first. And like I mentioned, I dropped out of high school. I had a GED. Yep. And when I talked to the Marines recruiter, he actually came to my house where I was living, and he was like, "Hey, like this is the deal." And he gave me like his whole spiel, trying to sell it to me, and I was like, "I'm already gonna join, dude. Like, come on." So we did some paperwork, and he's like, "We're not actually taking people with a GED right now." He's like, "We can't even get you a waiver. We can't get you in with just a GED." So I went across the hallway to talk to the Army recruiter, like in their office. They were all in the same building. So the Army's like, "Yeah, man, come on in. We'll take anybody."
So you were 19 or 20 at this time? 19?
I was, no, I was 20.
Okay. So the Army, you picked the Army just based on the GED requirement. So what made you decide to pick the MOS of Combat Engineer?
I definitely wanted to do something combat. My recruiter explained that to me as well. I just want to say, by the way, like, it's common that in the military for people to say my recruiter lied to me. I did not have that experience. My recruiter was very straightforward about everything. And I guess on behalf of all recruiters out there, mine was pretty good. But anyway, he was infantry, and he was like, "Hey man, if you're going to do this," he's like, "do it right." He's like, "You should go for combat MOS." And I don't know, maybe he based that idea of the fact that I dropped out of school and got my GED, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you're not smart enough for all those other tech jobs anyway."
Brian, what year was this that you joined or that you signed up?
I signed up in 2008. Yeah, and actually that's part of the reason. I asked him too. I was like, "Hey, am I going to deploy if I pick a combat job?" And he's like, "Almost definitely." And I kind of wanted to. That was like the whole reason. Like I didn't want to join the military. Like I said, I dropped out of high school. I didn't want to join the military just for the GI Bill. I never thought I would be in college again. So I was like, like he offered me some extra kind of kicker for the GI Bill. And I was like, I don't need to know about that. I'm not going to use it when I get out. I was like, I kind of want to deploy. That's the whole reason I wanted to join.
Gotcha. Okay. So you obviously went to Fort Leonard Wood for your basic training in AIT, right?
Correct.
Yeah. How was that experience?
It wasn't terrible. I went to basic training in February and graduated in June. So I got to see like all the seasons there. But I grew up in upstate New York, so I was used to like heavy snowfall and cold temperatures, which is what we got a lot in basic training.
Did you pick your follow-on duty station, or did the follow-on duty station pick you?
No, it picked me for sure. I chose like Germany because they're like, yeah, you can choose like 3 different duty stations, and you're not guaranteed any of them.
Right.
But I was like, Yeah, okay. And I picked Germany and Korea and something else. I don't remember, but yeah, I was actually given Fort Hood, Texas.
That was your first duty station, Fort Hood?
Yeah.
What unit at Fort Hood did you go to?
First Cav.
Okay.
1-8, First Cavalry Division.
What were your thoughts on Fort Hood?
I thought it was cool at first, because I mean, I was kind of, I think I was going through like a country music kind of phase, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm in Texas. So, it felt cool. I'd never been, I hadn't been to many states at this point in my life, so I was like, it's cool to get somewhere new. It's the furthest west I'd ever been. And I had just turned 21 3 days after I graduated basic training. So, in AIT. So I was like, yeah, I'm a brand new private out on my own. I'm just turned 21. I could drink legally now. I'm in the Army serving my country. And I thought I was making big steps out there.
So you went from upstate New York to Fort Hood, Texas, essentially.
Yes.
Via Fort Leonard Wood, huh? Must have been. You never been outside of upstate. I mean, you've probably been outside of upstate New York, but was it a big culture shock for you to be down
my
there?
family when I was younger, my family we took a couple of road trips to Florida to go to like Disney and stuff. But yeah, pretty much just mostly. But I was a little kid back then, so I didn't really get to adventure much on my own. So essentially, yeah, it was my first time out of the state on my own.
And you went to middle of Texas.
Yeah. Yep.
What was your experience at Fort Hood?
It was pretty good. Basic training AIT kind of instills discipline you need for your first unit. So, I was just, on my P's and Q's the whole time. Like, I guess I probably came off as shy just because I was trying to like feel out with an active unit, actually with like drill sergeants. It was just regular NCOs, not drill sergeants or anything. So it was a little different to get the structure of it. But yeah, the PT every day, we didn't really. I mean, we did different stuff every day. The one thing we didn't really do a lot of was rucking.
So it had to training. It had to have been kind of a. Did they send you to the B6 course, the Bravo 6 course up at Leonard Wood when you're up here or not?
No.
Okay, so what was your job when you went to Fort Hood? That's okay. What was your job when you went to Fort Hood then?
My job when I went to Fort Hood, I was just a combat engineer.
Yeah, I know, I got that. Driver.
So what we had, we were mechanized. So we had Bradleys, and I was a dismount in a Bradley.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. Did you deploy from Fort Hood?
Yes. I was there for about 6 months, and we deployed to Kirkuk, Iraq. We were supposed to go to Mosul, but our orders changed, like on the way there. So we went to Kirkuk, and we were at Fob Warrior, I believe is what it was called. Is that right? It was the Air Force Base in Kirkuk, whatever that one's called.
I have no idea. What did you guys do there? Rock clearance stuff?
Yeah, so we would go out almost every day. It was actually every night we would go out, and we had like big trucks. We had the Buffalo, the Husky, some RG-31s, RG-33s, which is just a longer version of that. And we had them decorated like crazy with KC lights. And we would go out at night, and we would look for disturbances in soil and try to find IEDs. And we had a JSS nearby called McHenry. And by vehicle, it was probably about an hour away. And we had a lot of logistics convoys go back and forth to McHenry and the FOB we were at. So we had to clear the route for them several times a week.
Did you guys find some shit or not?
Yeah, it was. Towards the beginning, actually, my truck was the first one that I saw get hit, and really, I wasn't really overwhelmed by it because I think what happened is the IED didn't go all the way off. We didn't find it, we rode over it because we just didn't see the soil disturbed, or we didn't catch anything. And all it did was it flattened our tire, and it made a loud noise. It was like, I don't know. Imagine shooting like a handgun in a concrete hallway. It's like the echo noise it would make.
Yeah.
Like, so it was just loud, but it didn't do much vehicle damage. So, and then there was no follow up contact. There was no like ambush, no gunfire or anything. So,
but
I mean, after that, it picked up. I think the leadership was saying that that's what they do, is they just do a small attack to kind of figure out how you react to it and kind of learn from that. So then later down the road, they could do a more complex kind of attack.
Did you get a Purple Heart for that? No, your cab. You got a cab
No,
for that, right?
I got a cab. Yeah, I got a cab. And I was like, really? I get a cab for that? Like, like isn't really feel merited. But I mean, further on into the deployment, there were other incidences that I felt it was more merited.
So was that the most significant event of that deployment, or did something else happen?
No, I don't know if there was any one significant event that happened that deployment. Eventually, our Buffalo started getting hit, and I remember one time the Buffalo got hit with such a big IED that it lifted up the whole front end of it, and it kind of looked like the Buffalo was doing a wheelie. And I don't know how much those things weigh off the top of my head, but if you can imagine like just the size of the Buffalo, how much it must weigh with all the armor and everything on it, it had to be a pretty big explosion to lift the front end off the ground. But I was not in that. One guy got a concussion. Another guy like hurt his knee a little bit. Everybody was still alive. Everybody was fine.
Lucky, huh?
Yeah, really lucky. There were no severe casualties on that deployment. Nobody ever had to get medevac. Nobody got killed. At least from our unit. I mean, there was a sniper in the AO somewhere, and somebody from another unit got killed. But nobody in my company was killed at that deployment.
So you PCS'd, right? You got orders. Did you pick drum? Was it a re-enlistment option, or how did you end up at drum?
Yeah, so after deployment, I knew that one of the guys in my unit re-enlisted to go to Fort Drum because he wanted to go into the light infantry unit, and I talked to him a little bit about it. And he was like, "Hey, what's in upstate New York? What's at Fort Drum? What is there to do?" I was like, "Oh yeah, it's pretty cool. There's like a couple lakes nearby. You go jet skiing and stuff." And after I thought about it for a while, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll PCS to Fort Drum. Maybe I can see if that's an option for me. So I talked to the re-enlistment NCO in our battalion, and so I was able to I was able to re-enlist with the incentive being PCSing to Fort Drum. So within like 3 months, I was already on my way to Fort Drum, and actually, so the other guy, probably know him, Sergeant McKinney. He
I've heard of him.
to Fort Drum. He was supposed. You heard of him?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was supposed to go to 7th Engineers, and when I got my orders, it said 3rd Brigade Special Troops Battalion, 10th Mountain. And when I was on my way there, I was on like leave or whatever, PCS leave, and he was at what do they call it when you get somewhere? You have to like
replacement.
No, what?
He was at the replacement center.
I don't know if that's what they call it. Inception? No, intake. What do they call it?
It's the reception. It's the
reception. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. No, that's what it is. So yeah, he was there.
I love you, Brian.
And his orders got changed. His orders got changed to go to the same unit that I was going to. So just pretty luckily, we got sent to the same unit.
So you and Sergeant McKinney knew each other from Fort Hood?
Yeah, we went on that deployment to Iraq together. Then we both re-enlisted to go to Fort Drum, and we got put in the exact unit, the same platoon, and eventually the same squad.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's nuts,
I mean, I've never heard of anybody being able to do that. So I don't know. Yeah, I think we just got lucky, and we were just like, hey, dude, like, how'd that happen? Never really questioned it.
So you and McKinney showed up to drum. How was that?
Yeah, he got there before I did, a little while before I did, but then I got there, and when I was on leave, I took like a month of leave, and while I was on leave, I was like, all right, this is a light infantry unit. You know, I talked to some people from my last unit. I was like, what's 10th Mountain like? And they're like, oh, it's all go-getters. It's like you got to really be on top of your game. So the whole 30 days I was on leave, I was running almost every day. I was like, all right, I got to show up. I got to make myself look good as soon as I get there, because that's, you say, like, you shouldn't judge people. Don't judge a book by its cover, but that's exactly what the Army does.
Exactly what they do. Yep.
Yeah, you gotta look good. You gotta perform well. You gotta be better than everybody else, and you don't want to be the low guy on the totem pole. So even though I was kind of lower ranking, I got demoted on my first deployment. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
So anyway, it doesn't matter. So I got to Fort Drum as a PFC with a year deployment under my belt. And they was like, why are you only a PFC? I was like, doesn't matter, But when I got there, they were like, hey, we're going to do an ability group run. My first day there, and I was like, oh, man, I know these. So I was like, I'm going to go with B group and, just kind of feel out how everybody does. And they're like, no, new guy, you're running with A group. We're going to test it. We're going to test you out. So I ran with A group, and I was like probably like the third or fourth fastest guy in A group, which for those who don't know, that A group is the faster guys.
Yeah, they're like 7:30 and faster minute mile guys.
Yeah, and I was below 7 minutes normally. I was in like the 13 something 2 mile run time. So I mean, it felt good for me because, like, I started off my first day with people be going like, hey, good job, new guy, So, but yeah, I could tell right away 10th Mountain was way different than First Cav.
You're Brian. Are you trying to tell me that 10th Mountain is way different than Fort Hood?
Yeah.
So how long was it once you showed up at Drum before you deployed?
I got to Drum in, I think it was somewhere around July 1st, or maybe like beginning of July, end of June, that kind of time frame. And I was there for like 7 months. We deployed in March, I believe, 2011. 7 months.
Okay. What was your mission on that deployment?
Our mission was to, I mean, I don't know the technical jargon anymore. I don't have it written down. But what we did on that deployment is we would do dismounted patrols through villages and kind of interact with the local populace to just kind of figure out what was going on with the Taliban in that area. And our job, we were attached to a platoon of infantry guys, and their job was to kind of do all that. We were attachments on those patrols. So our job was to walk in front of the infantry guys and search for IEDs using GPR, ground penetrating radar.
What was the area you guys we all went to? Just for the audience.
It was the Arghandab River Valley in Kandahar. Was there another name for it? Should I be more specific?
No, you're fine. You're good.
Okay. But yeah, all of our patrols took place in what was known as the Green Zone, and I'm guessing because of all the vegetation there. But yeah, it was in the river valley, so there was a ton of pomegranate orchards. There was grape rows, which are basically like 8-foot tall rows of dirt that grapes grow down. And we had to hump over those. You can't walk along them because that's where the IEDs are. You got to somehow jump over 6 to 8 foot rows of dirt to maneuver anywhere.
Pick a line and just walk it. That's what happened.
Yeah.
How was that deployment?
That deployment compared to my first one, let's compare my first deployment to like walking through a thunderstorm. Like you're walking through some bad weather one day, and it just kind of ruins your day. Where the second deployment is more like the Wild West in the early 1800s. It's like it was just like I don't know. It kind of seemed like a war zone to me. It was pretty intense.
Pretty wild. What was
Yeah,
what was some of the significant events that you remember?
I mean, there's definitely a few of them. I can talk about all of them if you want. I don't know how much time we have, but
I got all day. I got it all day, brother.
Okay. So well, I mean, the very first day we were there, I got there a little early. There was like a group of, I don't know, maybe 10 of us that were the first ones there to kind of establish like where we were living and everything. The unit we were replacing, and the first significant memory I had was that very first day. What was the unit we replaced? Was it 101st?
Yes, fourth.
Yeah,
I think fourth B or 4th Brigade, 101st.
Okay. Yeah, we replaced them, and they're like, "Hey, let's go out. Let's do left seat, right seat. We'll show you guys what we've been doing and what works for us." So we went out with them, and I'd never been trained on the Minehound before, the GPR. And they were just like, "Hey, why don't you take this, and you're going to lead. You're going to be point man." I was like, "What? I don't know how to work this." And they're like, just listen for a tone. You'll know it when you hear it." And I was like, "What the hell, man?" And I didn't tell you, I think I hit it pretty well, but I was scared shitless. They were talking about how many guys stepped on IEDs, lost their legs, got killed and everything. I had never been trained on this equipment, and they were just kind of like, "Yeah, just listen for like the way the tone changes, and you'll know when there's an IED." And luckily, I didn't hear anything or step on anything, but that was kind of like a wake up call. That was like, "Hey, you're in the shit now. You better know what you're doing."
So imagine this though. Think about that though. So I remember doing air insertion missions with you guys, your squad or whatever, and I remember the infantry guys handing off the Valens or the Minehounds to the A&A guys and saying, "Hey, you're point man now."
Yeah.
But they did it as we were sitting on the waiting for the helicopter to pick us up. You remember that?
Yes, I do remember that.
Nuts, man. So I understand the fear that you probably went through, knowing that this was life or death, almost essentially life or death. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing though. They probably didn't even have to give the Minehounds to the A&A guys, because I mean, a lot of the guys we worked with were just kind of like the A&A guys, A&P guys. They're kind of expendable. Like, let's just make them walk out front anyway.
Right. So your first mission, we did the right seat, left seat ride. That they handed you the Minehound and said, "Hey, just go. You'll figure it out."
Yeah, pretty much. He showed me how to turn it on, turn it off, and
calibrate it.
He's like, "Yeah. There wasn't really much training, on the job training, I guess." But yeah, so that was the first kind of thing that made me like really open my eyes and just kind of realize that I better make sure I know what I'm doing, because it's not just me that's going to get killed or hurt if anything goes wrong, but everybody else is there too that kind of is depending on me being the point man. So after that, the guys that I was with, they were the guys I ended up going on patrols with, later into the deployment. And after that day, they're like, "Oh, you've had experience with the Minehounds out in the field, so why don't you just keep using it?" And I'm just like, "What?" Okay. So luckily McKinney was in my squad, and he had actually gone to a class on the Minehound.
Yep.
So once he got there, I was like, "Hey, dude, you got to show me how to use this thing. Like, I got to know everything what I'm doing." So he went over it with me. We actually buried stuff in the ground to kind of test it out, and so we would be able to recognize the sounds that it would make when there's a change of density in the soil. So that helped. Well, one thing I realized when I was using the Minehound after that, like later into the deployment, is that it's not convenient to use the Minehound because it's kind of bulky and a little bit heavy, especially after like a few kilometers of carrying it and just waving it around. It's not convenient to carry your full combat load and a rifle and a grenade launcher and everything you need plus the Minehound. So what I started doing is I would leave my rifle with somebody else, and I would only carry a grenade launcher, just a handheld grenade launcher, and I'd have it clipped to my vest with a D-ring. And I remember the first sergeant found out about that, our first sergeant, and he got upset. I think I signed my rifle out to one of our new guys. As I got there the first day, I was like, hey, you don't have a weapon yet? I don't need mine. You take mine. I also had an M9 pistol. So I had short range, long range. I had it all covered. So I gave my rifle away, signed it over to one of our privates. And my standard combat load was just a bunch of grenades, grenade launcher, and the mine hound, and my pistol. And I remember first sergeant found out that I signed my rifle to one of our new guys, and he got upset, and he signed me an M16. And I was like, well, what the hell? And like, I don't remember what I did. I think I ended up signing it back into the arms room without him knowing. But then by the end of our deployment, that was the standard. I think that was like the SOP, the brigade SOP for using the mine hound.
Right.
Is that you're not supposed to have like your rifle with it because it gets in the way, like the sling gets tangled up and everything.
You're hanging onto a metal piece of equipment that's gonna fuck up your detecting,
Yeah, that too. I didn't really think about that. I just wanted to carry less. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty practical. And then, if you needed to, you could always trade off with somebody. I think the other part of the SOP was that somebody had to be pretty close behind you that had a rifle. So if anything went down and, they had to cover you, they're right there behind you with their rifle.
Yep. And they could grab you and pull you back.
Yeah.
So what else happened? Come on.
Okay. So the next significant event was when we were out with Bravo Company 287, and we were on a patrol. It was June 18th, in case you were wondering. We were out. We had what everybody said was like a skeleton crew. So we had like a handful of A&A guys. I think it was like a 1-to-1 ratio. We had maybe like 12 infantry guys and 12 A&A guys. And we just did a patrol. It wasn't too far away from Maclon. We lived for most of the deployment. And we went into the green zone, and one of the elements of our patrol called up on the radio and was like, hey, we got to get the engineers up here. We think we found some det cord in the ground. So me and a couple other guys were moving up, and we saw something funky on the opposite side of a wadi. So we didn't cross the wadi. But we had a charge at this point because we would kind of make different charges because different charges with C4 were more practical than others for certain kind of events or certain kind of applications. So I actually made up one that kind of throw it like a lasso, and everybody liked it, but the command didn't really like the name of it that I had.
What was the name?
It was, you cut up a block of C4 into thirds. And then, like, every 10 inches on a long string of det cord, you put a third of a block of C4. And I called it the anal beads charge. Because it was just a bunch of balls of C4 along a string. And it's kind of what it looked like to me. So I took one of the anal beads charges, and I threw it across the wadi, and I was able to pull it back until it sat over that piece of det cord that we saw in the ground. Then after that, we're waiting for permission to blow it up, basically. And we hear like 3 explosions back to the north to where the rest of the patrol was. And we hear the lieutenant get on the radio saying that there were several casualties, and he was screaming. Not really screaming, but you could tell he was distressed. And he said that there were several casualties and that he gave us a distance and direction, said we had to start laying scunion towards this building. And I didn't know what scunion was. I'd never heard that phrase before, but I could tell by the context. I was like, we just got to go like full send, just give them everything we got. And so we started. So anyway, while this happened, once those explosions went off and like there's radio chatter and everything going on, something happened on the other side of the wadi, and I thought that the IED that we allegedly found had gone off, but what we found out after that, an RPG was shot at us.
No shit.
And so as we were, an RPG was shot at us, landed right on the other side of the wadi where the IED and the anal bead charge was. And so I was the last one out, and I was like, hey, we can't just leave the C4 here, and I can't just, unprime it and pack it back up and put it in my bag. I just got to blow it. There's explosions going off everywhere anyway. And so what happened, I just went to pull the M81, like the initiator, to just kind of, I thought the IED had gone off. I didn't know at the time there was an RPG. So I was like, well, we can't just leave the M81 here. So what I did is I thought it was just going to be like shock tube going off. But the blast from the RPG actually moved the anal beads charge like further towards like the wall that we were lined up against. And luckily, I was the last one out there. So when I pulled the M81, the charge actually went off, and it scared the shit out of me because I thought the charge blew up. Because I thought the IED blew up the charge.
Shit. So wait. So the charge was still intact, and you just thought you would come out.
The charge was still fully intact. I thought it blew up because I thought the IED went off.
Gotcha.
And then later we found out that the RPG had actually just blasted it into a different position.
Dang. So it scared the shit out of you, huh?
Yeah. I thought I was just going to like pull the M81 and hear like a little blasting.
A little firecracker, right?
Was,
yeah, like a little pop.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but yeah, there was probably 2 full blocks of C4. I mean, obviously it loses some blast when it's cut up. Yeah. But yeah, there was about 2 full blocks of C4 that just went off and just like, it scared the shit out of me. I thought, I didn't know what to think.
How dumb did you feel?
Well, I mean, I didn't really feel anything at the time. I just knew we had to get the fuck out of there and move up north and start laying scunion. But afterwards, somebody else had seen it, and they were just like, we talked about it later, and like, hey, there's nothing else we really could have done at that point. Because, I mean, like I said, you can't really, in a firefight like that, like when you're, there was small arms contact after that, too. So we basically got ambushed, and we were fighting for at least a good hour. So once we started bounding up north, we were bounding like just what we do in training when we go to JRTC and stuff like that. And the OCs are like, no, this is how you got to do it. You got to get cover. Let the other guy bound up. Then when he's set, you got to bound up. And we were doing just like that. Everything just kicked in all at once. We were communicating. We were looking at each other, making eye contact, covering fire, bounding. It was, if it wasn't such a serious situation, it would have been so badass and cool.
It's so fucking crazy though, honestly, Brian. When you start doing that shit in real life, and it's actually happening, it's an experience, man. Yeah. It's stuff you'll never ever get to do again.
No, you won't, and you don't even think about it either. Like if you were to try to think about that, you'd be like, all right, what do we do? Wait, whose turn is it to go? It's like no, it just kicks in. You don't even think about it, and it's because like when you're training, dude, like we're up all hours of the night. We sleep 2 or 3 hours at a time, and you end up basically doing this shit half asleep in training. So when shit kicks off for real, you don't even have to think about it. You just start doing it.
Yeah, it's people will never understand unless you've gone through it, like what that's like to have to go and do that for real. I used to make fun of training and stuff like, oh, this is lame, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then when you actually get to go do it, it's a whole nother thing because you get shot in the head.
Yeah. And even if I were still in the Army, even talking about this and how important it is to that training, because when it happens for real, you know exactly what to do. If I were still in right now, I'd still complain about training, though. I hated it so much.
I know.
But I liked it. I like seeing the other guys suffer. Like when I see somebody else struggling, if it's raining, everybody's miserable. I'm just like, yeah, it sucks, it fucking sucks. But you gotta do it. So anyway, we were bounding north. There was a building that we were taking contact from, and I was all right. So I've always played video games as a kid and even an adult, like Call of Duty and stuff like that. I learned how to shoot a grenade launcher, basically like the trajectory of it from playing video games. And I didn't even have leaf sights on my grenade launcher. And it wasn't like the undermounted grenade launcher. It was just a handheld 320.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would take it and I would be able to like lob one shot, and on the second or third shot, I would have it walked in, and I would be able to like know exactly how to aim it to get into like a window of a building, which is exactly what I did. The second shot went into the building. I even told Will, because Sergeant McKinney was with us on that patrol, and I was like, "Hey, Will, dude, check this out." Like, even though shit was going on, that's where we had to shoot anyway. But he saw me like get it right into the window. And he was like, "Oh my god, that's amazing!" And yeah, we. So anyway, we finished bounding back up. My combat load for that actually was about 40 rounds of 40 Mike, and because like I said, I didn't carry a rifle or anything, so I had extra room for extra ammo for the grenade launcher. I was completely black on ammo, and I had to borrow rounds from other guys. And then a bunch of guys with rifles and Salas, they started getting really low on ammo too, because we were fighting for almost an hour. We had the A-10s go overhead, and like they lit up that building. That was kind of crazy, because like the shells were like the size of my forearm, and they were like landing on our heads and everything.
Did you guys end up getting them? Did you guys end up going in the building?
I really can't. We didn't go into the building. I don't know if anybody did on that patrol. What happened is we actually had to have the battalion commander's PSD come out to meet us halfway on our exfil, because there were several casualties that were taken away on a medevac bird. That was actually our medic that was with us. He got killed that day. His name was Brian Backus, PFC Brian Backus. Another one of our infantry guys, Blaze Flamio, he was wounded pretty bad. His legs got all messed up. It was a recoilless rifle. What were those rounds?
The 107.
The 80.
Oh,
the 82.
Yeah, 82. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, 82 millimeter recoilless rifle was shot at us, and like a bunch of guys caught it shrapnel. They had like a little patrol day set up while we were investigating the IED, and a bunch of guys just got peppered with shrapnel. Some guys worse than others. So yeah, a bunch of guys were taken away on medevac bird. The medic was killed.
That's the one that that's the one that Reyes shut down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Reyes was there. I actually forgot about that. Yeah, Reyes was there, and that kind of fucked him up. Yeah, he was. I mean, everybody was distraught. It wasn't just him. Everybody after that mission. We got back to the Najran AMP station, which is where we SP'd from, and we got back and we're kind of just pulling security at Najran, and like you just look at anybody and their eyes are just glazed over. They're just kind of, just like overwhelmed by what just happened. And that was insane. That's probably like one of the craziest things I saw that deployment.
And that was early in the deployment too.
Yeah, that was not even halfway through, and it was like something that you would see in a movie. Like, people see like war movies and assume that's what all war is like. And that day, it was exactly like that, from what I remember anyway. But yeah, between like just the ambush, the bounding, the casualties, like getting back to the patrol base and seeing everybody covered in blood from either getting hit with shrapnel or treating somebody else that was hit with shrapnel. It was very surreal, and that kind of opened everybody's eyes for the rest of the deployment. But before that, it was fun and games. We would be in a firefight, because the Taliban would take a couple shots and then run into a tree line. So we would just return fire, and sometimes, even though it was like 200 meters away, we'd be like, frag out, and we would throw grenades. It could only go like 20 meters maybe. So you can throw in a grenade at a guy that's 200 meters away, but you get to say you threw a grenade in a firefight.
Right. Yeah, I remember when you guys came back from that. Yeah, it was hard. I could tell you.
Yeah.
I could tell you guys were all you guys were changed after that.
Yeah, it's it was definitely an eye opener. Yeah, and actually, I think we had a detainee that mission too, and I remember like so many of the infantry NCOs were just like, I just want to fucking kill that detainee. I know he had something to do with it. So yeah, that was that experience. Yeah. Okay, so we were doing a pretty big operation throughout the entire brigade, and this one I'm still a little fuzzy on the details because, like, halfway through the deployment, we started getting assigned to different units that we didn't really work with on a regular basis. So like sometimes we'd go work out with 4-4 Cav, and sometimes it'd be like Charlie 287. Sometimes it'd be I don't know. It was like different units. You know, at the beginning it was like all Bravo 287 or all Delta 287. But this mission, I remember we split up the engineers pretty thin. So I was the only engineer with this element of the patrol, and we were basically we had to start at like, I don't know, I think it was like 3 o'clock in the morning we started, and we walked probably, I couldn't even guess how many kilometers we walked, but it was pretty rough, a little intense. But we set up a support by fire in like a really small village. There was only like 2 or 3 buildings in this village, and the NCO in charge of the patrol, he was like, "Hey, why don't you just go get on top?" He's like, "Clear the area, clear the village and everything." And so I cleared like the ground, and I actually got up on the rooftops, cleared the rooftops with the minehound, just in case, because that's where we were going to be laying and everything. So I got up on top of the roof. We got set in. I was with the machine gunner, and we started taking contact. After like an hour or two, we started taking contact, and the machine gunner was just laying down a wall of lead. I started shooting my 320. I actually had an extended mag for my pistol. I had a 33-round magazine, and I just started shooting that, just kind of for fun. But then I remember hearing an explosion. I knew there was another element over to our, I guess it would have been west. And I remember seeing just like, it looked like an IED went off. Like I just saw a bunch of like debris in the sky and everything, and like a cloud of dust. I was like, oh shit. I was like, some of our guys are in that element. I knew it was Riley and Comp and McKinney. And I was like, well, hopefully, that wasn't somebody stepping on IED. Maybe that was like, I told myself, I was like, it's probably just like a blast or something, one of our charges. But I was like, but I didn't hear anything on the radio about a death barrage being cleared. So I kind of just kept an eye out and like, started asking people like, hey, what happened over there? And they're like, oh, there's a casualty over there. I was like, oh shit. Well, the engineers are usually in the front with the mine detectors. So maybe it's one of the engineers. And, they were just like, yeah, I was like, hey, give me a battle roster number when you find out, battle roster number or anything. I was like, maybe I can, figure out who it was. And so, like, I'm still a little fuzzy on some of the details, but our element eventually, we were there for like a couple more hours. Our element eventually met up with another element, and, some of the engineers were there, and I was like, hey, do you guys know who the casualties were? Do you know anything, like who was it? And nobody seemed to know, and even the PA was on patrol, acting as a medic, first responder kind of that day. And nobody knew for that whole patrol who the casualties were. And I was like, man, this is kind of weird. I was like, most of my guys are back here. They said that the rest of the guys are with a different element, like going back. So anyway, yeah, like, we started exfilling later in the day, and it wasn't until we got back to Najran A&P station, I saw Comp, because, it's Comp,
yep,
McKinney, and Riley, and I saw Comp come back into the gate, because I was watching it like a hawk. I was like, man, where are all those? I was like, because I saw, everybody else from my patrol. I saw White, Sergeant White, I saw Sinyard, and I saw, whoever else was out that day. I saw all of them. And I was like, I didn't see that group of 3. They were all with the same element. And I saw Comp come through. And I went to go right up to Comp. And Sergeant White was like, hey, Shapiro, give me a minute with Comp. And I was like, okay. And so Sergeant White called us all over, and they were like, hey, so McKinney and Riley are both injured, both casualties, both still alive. We think they're going to be fine. And so, like, I kind of just, my jaw just dropped, like my heart sank. Because like I said, Will and I, McKinney and I were close. We went on a whole another deployment together. Then we enlisted. We got put in the same squad and went to another deployment together. And so, like, we were pretty close the entire time we were in. And just hearing that, like, having that thought in my head all day, like, it might have been him, kind of bothered me. But it wasn't until, like, Sean actually said something when he was like, yeah, it was Will, he's stepped on an IED, took the direct blast to his leg. And I was like, well, shit. I was like, he's still alive, so that's good news. But yeah, that kind of that hit me pretty hard. And the next day, I remember we got back to Passab because once he told us that, we were already expelled and everything, and the mission was over, and we were just kind of like sharing information, like what we knew, what happened, and everything. And then he told us that, and then we went back to the fob. And then First Sergeant Gall was waiting there, and he saw me, and he just like came up to me and gave me a hug. Like, everybody knew how close McKinney and I were, and First Sergeant was like almost in tears, like he was tearing up, and he was like, "Dude, man," he's like, "I'm so sorry." And so like it wasn't until I saw him like tearing up that I started getting upset. I was like, "Fuck, man!" I was like, "I can't believe this happened." And everybody actually was really, not really like catering to me. Everybody was just like really nice and like apologetic and kind of knew what I was going through. And but yeah, it wasn't until the next day I actually got pissed off. The next day, a couple people came up to me and they were like, "Yeah, I knew the whole time. I wasn't going to tell you during the patrol in case you freaked out or something." And I was like, "Well, why would you even tell me like after the fact?" Like, so
right.
Like, my own leadership was like, "Why would you even say that?" Like, "Oh yeah, I knew the whole time it was McKinney, but I just didn't tell you."
Yeah, that's some bullshit.
Like, I wish I knew, because like I spent that whole patrol like wondering if it was him or not. If somebody were like, "Hey, yeah, McKinney stepped on IED, hit his leg, he's still alive," I would have been like, "All right, because he's still alive." I would have continued on the mission. I think, I've always been pretty level-headed, and I like to think that's how I would have reacted. But instead, it kind of like festered all day in my mind. And then that night, like I found out for sure, like the anticipation, like the waiting to actually hear the news, I think was worse than if I found out right away.
Right. I think maybe probably people were kind of worried about you too, like if you were gonna start launching that grenade launcher. I mean, because if people don't know you, they don't know what your reaction's gonna be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought about that too. I've been thinking about this for years, on and off. But I like to think that people knew me pretty well. Like I kind of stand out usually, and I like to think people knew me well enough to think to give me the benefit of the doubt that I would have handled it well. But at the same time, they're like, "Hey, like I guess anybody can become unstable in that kind of environment."
How'd the rest of the deployment go for you?
That was what?
How'd the rest of the deployment go for you?
The rest of the deployment, it had its ups and downs. There were a couple of guys that got hurt after that. I remember there was one A&A guy. He stepped on an IED. He didn't wear gear like us either. And I remember he was just like mangled. Like it looked like he just landed off like the Empire State Building. Like he jumped off and like his legs were twisted the wrong way. And other than that, it was more of the same stuff. None of our guys. Well, actually, here's another thing. Griff got shot. Griff and I were pretty close. Whenever I had problems or like issues of how to deal with, let's say I was like butting heads with somebody in leadership position, I would usually go to Griff. He was pretty level-headed, and I'd be like, "Hey, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I doing this right? Like, what do you think? What should I do?" But him and Will got hurt like a couple days apart from each other, and those two guys were my best friends during that deployment. Them and Franklin, and so they all got hurt. And at one point, it was just me left. Like all my friends were kind of just gone. They all got hurt, and I'm sitting there by myself. Like, all right, I'm next. So like the rest of the deployment was like really heavy on me mentally. They tried to send me to first platoon, and I clearly didn't want to go, and somehow it didn't happen. I don't know if you had something to do with that or somebody else in the leadership, but I was like, I don't want to go to first platoon. I want to stay here. Like I already know this AO, I already know this, like the guys I'm working with and everything. Good working relationship. But yeah, the whole rest of the deployment, I was wondering like, when am I going to get hurt?
Right.
My friend's hurt. I'm the last one.
Yeah.
And then it didn't hit me until I got home, actually. And I was like, man, like, why did I come home without a scratch, essentially? And like actually that bothered me for a while. And I was told to go to behavioral health after I got back, and my therapist started using terms like survivor's guilt and everything, and I was like, well, shit, yeah, like that makes a lot of sense. Like the term survivor's guilt, it's like he didn't have to explain it to me. I knew what it was right away. It was just like, everybody else got hurt. I probably should have gotten hurt too. Maybe I didn't do my job right. And there's like a lot of thoughts kind of went through my head at that time.
So you did end up coming back and then getting some therapy though, right?
Yeah. I went to behavioral health for a while. I went through the TBI group. Do you remember they were doing that?
Yes.
Like you get a profile, you don't have to do PT and everything. And it lasts for like 4 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that. I think you left the company when I was going through it. And actually that might have been a mistake for me to do, even though like I needed the help. I definitely had TBI, and I definitely had PTSD, like survivor's guilt, like I said. And when I was going through the TBI group, I got a new platoon sergeant. I won't say his name, even though I don't really hold grudges. But if I ever saw this guy again, even if he would be nice to me, I wouldn't give him the time of day. But it's hard when it's your leadership. You can't really hold the grudge.
We'll talk offline. You can tell me later.
Okay. But yeah, as I was going through the TBI group, as you know, you have a profile. You don't have to wake up early and do PT with your platoon, your squad, or anything. You report to the TBI group on the old post. So I don't remember what time it was, but it was like maybe like 9 o'clock in the morning. I had to go over there and we do like cognitive therapy and like kind of classes and everything on how to deal and like it's kind of a support group too. There's a bunch of other veterans with TBI there, and you support each other and basically learn how to deal with TBI and how to avoid triggering headaches and everything. Like bright lights will kind of give you headaches. There's different symptoms. Everybody experiences it differently. But by the time I was like maybe halfway through that group, I was walking to my car while my squad was doing PT, my platoon was doing PT. And I was walking to my car to go to that meeting, and that platoon sergeant called me out. He told me I was a piece of shit, that I was a shitbag soldier because I wasn't doing PT with my platoon. And I was like, well, I'm in the TBI group, Sergeant. And he basically told me I was being put in. This is all in front of all my soldiers and other NCOs. And after the TBI group was done, I had to come back to my platoon, to the line, and somehow figure out how to still be a leader after this guy had talked so much shit to me and about me to and in front of my soldiers, which I thought was always the most unprofessional thing that any NCO could do.
Right. And that's exactly the problem, is because the big army preaches, get help if you need help or whatever. And then when you go get help, some fucking asshole like that does that.
Yeah. And I've always heard that too. I've always heard, I knew that you were going to, catch some grief if you try to like actually get help for yourself, because I mean, some guys, I've seen it, some guys that do it are like malingering. They're just trying to get out of doing stuff. But, you would think that given the circumstances, somebody just got back from a tough deployment, went through some shit. And there were other NCOs there that kind of knew what I went through, and they went through like similar stuff, and they had nothing to say to back me up. It was all just kind of like...
The other thing, Brian, that I have to say is like even if you err on the side of the soldier, right, who's getting help, who cares? Who cares if you take a chance that guy's malingering or whatever, right? You need to be on that side of that guy that needs to go get help, I mean, it's stupid. It's stupid to belittle people like that.
And, that was also... I can't remember who was the first sergeant at the time, because we had First Sergeant Espinoza for a while, and that guy, nobody liked him. Nobody liked First Sergeant Espinoza. He's like fair, but
that was before
nobody
me, though,
liked
right?
him. And that,
yep,
you were still there, right?
Well, I think we had Espinoza, then we went to Gaw, then you guys had Britain after I left.
No. After Gaw. When we got back, we had Espinoza.
No idea.
No, First Sergeant Taylor was the one before I got there.
Okay, gotcha.
That was before Gaw. I think, right? Because I wasn't there.
Yes.
I was only there for Gaw and then Espinosa and then Britain.
Okay.
But yeah, actually, that's another thing that kind of messed me up is, when I was getting the help, the TBI group and behavioral health and everything, I had appointments every week, for the first couple months when we got back. And usually it was like the time of day where, and I would know better than to schedule. If we're going out to the field, I would go out to the field. I wasn't going to schedule like behavioral health so I couldn't go out to the field. But usually I would do it for like later in the afternoon. So it didn't really interrupt too much with, our regular business workday kind of stuff, which at that time was still, I don't know, cleaning weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got promoted to sergeant while we were deployed. And when we got back, I was told to go to WLC, professional development leadership course for NCOs. So what I did is I knew that I couldn't keep making appointments every week while I was going to WLC. So what I did is I told my therapist, I was like, hey, I have to cancel all these appointments for the next couple of months until I finish this school. And he was like, all right, if you think you're able to do that, do it. And I actually got in some trouble while I was in that school. And I actually got kicked out of that school because I said some things, and it wasn't mean, I wasn't being mean to anybody, but I just talked to them the way we talked to each other at the time.
Right.
Because in combat, you keep each other on your toes, you kind of talk shit to each other. And I said some things to my squad that I guess I shouldn't have. And, looking back, yeah, it was probably a little unprofessional. But the only guy that had my back was First Sergeant Espinosa. And I don't know who told him or if anybody told him, or maybe he just kind of picked up on it. But he came in and he talked to the senior SGL and was like, hey, Shapiro, he's a good soldier, he's a good leader. He canceled his behavioral health appointments to be here. Like, he really wants to be here. And so he actually got me, it didn't do anything for me as far as being kicked out. I still got kicked out. But they wanted me to, I was supposed to go to the demotion board, actually. So when you get kicked out of professional development leadership course, you're supposed to go to the demotion board. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. You were already an E5?
Yes.
Yeah. You should have went to the reduction board.
Yeah. But he got me out of it, and he told the battalion sergeant major, kind of what I went through on the deployment and after the deployment, and he really stuck his neck out for me. And after that deployment, I was like, yeah, I've seen enough shit in the Army. I'm ready to get out. But when that guy took over and he stuck his neck out for me like that, he put me in the ops platoon. And he's like, within the next few weeks, you're going to be begging me to go back to the line. He's like, you're going to do so much paperwork and office work. And so I did. And then he wanted to send me to sapper school. I was getting super motivated to go to sapper school. He put me in charge since I was in the ops platoon. I was in charge of all the training schedules for guys going to sapper school, because we were sending guys left and right. Like, anybody that didn't have a sapper tab was going to go to sapper school. So I was in charge of the schedule and everything. I was all motivated. I was scheduling ranges, demo ranges, saw ranges and stuff like that. And it made me feel good that he stuck his neck out for me, while meanwhile my own platoon sergeant was calling me a shitbag for trying to get help for the same shit that Espinosa was helping me with. Then we had a different guy take over the company, and as acting first sergeant, and he kind of had the same mindset as that other platoon sergeant. And over, he had a talk with me one day and said that I need to change my attitude, and he tried to it felt like he was bullying me, like he was trying to I think honestly I was always a very good very good at PT and everything, and I think he kind of felt threatened by my presence and my demeanor, as of how I don't know how to explain that. I was always just very active, I stood out is basically what it was. And I was always told that I was a good leader and a good soldier. And after he had this sincere talk with me, it made me want to just get out that day. And I was like, I dropped my slot for Sapper School. I didn't tell anybody. I just went straight to S3, and I submitted whatever paperwork I needed. I dropped my slot for Sapper School, and I kind of just shut down the last few months I was in.
That was the end of it for you, right? At that point, you decided.
Yeah, that was the end of it.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's yeah. I guess more of the story is leadership makes a big difference.
So so you got out, obviously, single guy, got some college stuff. Where did you end up going?
So I actually moved to Buffalo, New York, for a couple of years.
Okay.
I stayed in Buffalo for 3 years.
Oh wait, yep, I know what you did
there. What'd I do
there? Went to college.
Did you want to tell the story? No.
Nope.
Yeah, actually, I did. I went to school for 2 semesters. Didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. I started off as an engineering major, but then I switched to biotechnology. I knew I wanted to do something science related. So I switched my major, kind of felt it out a little while. And I only went to school for 2 semesters. And then I started working again as a plumber, something that I had, a familiar skill set. So I worked at a plumbing supply house, and I started working there, and I still had like all my military discipline, all my bearing and everything. And they were like so impressed with my work ethic and everything that I knew from, the past experience I had in the plumbing industry. And they gave me a raise after 6 months, which never happens in that company. And then they moved me to a different location to be an assistant manager. Then I quit because, school full time. I was going to school at that time. And I was like, hey guys, school full time, work full time. I can't do them both. I'll try working a couple days a week and then doing school a couple days a week. And then I couldn't really balance that out either, because the classes I was taking, it was kind of hard to get all my homework done. Some assignments take like all day, or
what were you studying? I'm sorry. What were you?
At the time, I was studying engineering.
Okay.
So yeah, it just wasn't practical, and I had to take like so many math classes because like I fell behind on math over the years, so I had to start at the very bottom. So I had to take a accredited algebra class and a non-credited algebra class. And I was like, well, maybe the more, because like it's different levels. So I started taking those and some electives and everything, but just trying to relearn my study habits. I've been out of school for years, and I was never inherently good at school. Hence, I dropped out at 17. So I'm trying to like redevelop my study habits, and I just couldn't balance it with working. So when I quit, they actually called me back and asked me to be the branch manager of one of the locations.
All right. So you went from dropping out of high school, getting a GED, doing a little bit of time in the Army, and then going into college?
Yes. That's exactly what I did.
What college did you go to?
Well, I just went to community college in Niagara County.
Okay.
And
you decided
Buffalo.
to pick engineering?
Yeah. I knew. Like I said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew like the most bang for my buck, engineering was going to be the way to go. And I knew it was going to be hard, but once I started taking math classes, I was like, man, math just kind of makes sense. What I like about math is, there's no in-between answers. It's not like writing an essay and your teacher grading it based off of their opinions on your work. It's like, no, you didn't do this formula right, or you didn't do this right.
Right.
Or, yeah, you got this exactly. Like,
there are clear answers.
That have strict rules of what you can and can't do and what is and isn't right. So I like the idea of engineering and anything in the science field, basically, math or science. So yeah, I figured I'd give it a try, and I did okay. But I didn't really stick with it at first. So I only did 2 semesters, and I was like, all right, let me figure out what I want to do here. Then I bounced around a lot for the 3 years I was living in Buffalo. I moved around a couple of times. I got another job working with a buddy of mine as a plumber, and he was paying me pretty good money. And at the time, I was like, maybe I'll just save up a few bucks. I kind of want to get out of New York. I'm from New York. I don't want to be one of those guys that does 5 years in the Army, becomes like, that I feel like I did something that meant something to myself. I was like, I don't want to just like move back home and pick up where I left off. I see a lot of guys do that, and I was like, I don't want to be. I don't. That's a slippery slope for me. I don't want to fall back into the same lifestyle I was living before the Army. So I knew I wanted to get out of New York, and thinking if I just saved all my money for a little while I was working, I could get out and move and go wherever I wanted. So that's what I did.
So you ended up getting your degree?
No. So I did 2 semesters at that school, worked for a little while after that, and then I thought I wanted to go for astrobiology, which University of Washington in Seattle has an awesome program. Or near Seattle, has an awesome program for that. So I was like, I'm going to move to Seattle. That's where I'm going next. And so I moved from Buffalo, New York. I spent like a month on the road tripping. Actually, that's when I saw you last.
Yep, I remember.
I went to Seattle, and I didn't start school out there like I wanted to. The day I got there, I unloaded my car. I really wanted to work out because I was basically sitting in my car for a month, just traveling so much. I wanted to go to the gym, and I went in there to join as a member. And as they showed me around the gym, they did me a tour and everything. The fitness manager was like, "Hey, you really know what you're talking about. We're hiring. Do you want to get a job here?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I can totally do that, but I'm starting school soon. It's only gonna be a temporary thing, maybe like part time after that." But they basically, I was in Seattle for 2 hours and I got a job offer.
Nice.
So I took it. Worked at the gym for almost a year, and then So I mean, Seattle, it's if you like nightlife at all and you live in Seattle, it's hard not to go out a lot, which is something that ended up happening to me. So I was going out, I made a bunch of friends in like the club scene and everything, with a bunch of DJs, and I started getting into that a little bit, the discotheque kind of stuff. And I did that for about a year, kind of just partied for a year until I was like, all right, now it's time. I know what's out there now. I know what's out there waiting for me. If I ever want to have fun, I know where to go, but I really got to start, focusing on school. So after a year in Seattle, I moved to California. That's when I really started going to school full time and focusing on my degree.
What school did you go to in California?
I just went to a community college, Napa Valley Community College, and I don't want to go to university until I have all my classes done at a community college first.
Right.
Because it's going to be easier. It's a better student to professor ratio. If you need help, community college is the way to go. So.
So where are you at right now?
I'm in Colorado now.
Okay. Doing what?
I moved here to go to a different school, actually.
Nice.
Right now I'm trying to study engineering still. It's a little hard with taking all my classes online. For example, I'm taking physics right now, and it's really hard. We actually get to go on campus for an hour once a week to do our labs, but we're doing it accelerated because he doesn't want us on campus after November. So now we're done. He's like, I don't want you coming in too late in the season during flu season with the COVID stuff going on.
Oh boy!
So we're going to do all of our labs ahead of time, and you just take down as much data as you can, and then we'll talk about them later down the road.
So what part of Colorado are you in right now?
I'm basically in Denver. I'm right on the border of Denver and Lakewood.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, Brian, let me ask you, overall, if you were to talk to a young soldier, as you were several years ago, getting out of the Army, what would be one of the things you would tell them, him or her, you would do differently?
I want to say make sure you have a plan when you get out, because I told myself and everybody else that I had a plan for when I got out, but I really didn't. So I would definitely say make sure you have a plan. I definitely, now that I'm in school, I would definitely advocate for going to school.
Okay. Well, Brian.
Is that good enough?
Yep, good enough. Get a plan. Brian, thank you for your time. I appreciate this. I think you're going to help out a lot of people with your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. You got my number. You can call me anytime you want. You know that, right?
Sure do. Yes.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Getting the message out about suicide prevention is a team effort. We need people to be brave enough to tell their stories. We need supporters who care enough to spread the word. If you have a story you want to share, please email us at survivingasacivilian.casting@gmail.com. And if you want to help share this project, like and subscribe to Surviving as a Civilian on Instagram and Facebook. The most important thing Andrew and I want to get across is that if you need help, get help. And if you can give help, please do it. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is at 1-800-273-8255. Until next time.